we've got some very interesting stuff about the awards, about the people supporting Sheriff Morgan, and also we got kind of a theme for the show, which includes Sheriff Morgan and Commissioner Robertson, and it is about hubris of people in local elected office and the stance of their supporters, which is basically, you don't get to talk about that.
You shouldn't
talk about it. It's wrong to even talk about it.
Well, criticism is not healthy.
Of course it is. It may be the only thing that is.
Well, no, I'm saying to politicians. Criticism is never viewed favorably by politicians.
No. It's unfair, and
it's always personal.
And especially at an election time, which of course when nobody cares. That's exactly when the papers ought to be bringing out whatever they've got.
You have some comments about a viewpoint written by
I do.
A local businessman, Louis Baer, and are you going to talk about
he wrote a viewpoint, and this was in... And this was very... Was it yesterday or the day before?
I think it was this weekend.
It was this weekend, anyway.
Okay, yeah.
And this is a viewpoint about Commissioner Robertson. And basically what this viewpoint says is he's been cleared, he's been found not guilty, and any further talk about it is persecution.
So was O.J.
And so it was.
Go ahead.
So basically, this is what he says, and we'll go into some of the specifics.
Okay.
But that's kind of the theme of it. That he was just trying to he was trying to do a good job by getting the best man for the job. Some people could have thought he overstepped, and then so it wasn't all that bad to file the ethics violation. But then once the ethics violation cleared him of all charges, which apparently is not only a finding of no wrong in any sphere, but complete absolution, that it's absolutely persecution for the Pensacola News Journal to talk about this. And it immediately made me think of John Edwards, who now, it wasn't an ethics committee. It was a little higher standard, actually, a jury. Some of the ethics committees are pretty easy on folks.
They're political, sure.
Yeah. And so here is my take on that based on this editorial.
Well, we'll quote from the editorial, in fairness to the writer. I'm sorry.
Well, I've quoted it. All right, we'll do that afterward if you think that's better.
No, I just say whatever you're going to comment about, I want to make sure that it's not considered taken out of context. So whatever you're going to comment about from the editorial.
Right. Here's what the editorial
read what he said.
He said, did he exert some effort to assure that Escambia County, that its citizens got the best person for the job? That's the way he characterizes his actions. Now, in review, what he did was, clearly this, Mr. Gibbs is a friend of his, had business relationships, and he kind of stepped out of the normal procedures to urge the people making the decision about the job to hire Mr. Gibbs, who on paper appeared to be less qualified, and then somehow managed to get him an extra $10,000 more than the job was bid for.
Got it.
Which I thought was pretty important local news.
It was important.
Mr. Baird disagrees. So he characterizes that as some effort to assure that they got the best person for the job.
Okay.
And then he goes on to say, well, the News Journal went nuts about it. It seemed to many that the only newsworthy happening in the PAJJ distribution area, if not the whole world, was this story. Well, they did report some other stories, but in defense of the PNJ, this is a very important
Pensacola News Journal.
Pensacola News Journal. Right. And it had all these ramifications because other county commissioners stood up and said, we got to stop this.
They did.
And then it went on, and the story went on. The story had legs. And then Mr. Gibbs sued those county commissioners. And then when they rebid the job, he applied again. So he was simultaneously seeking a job at the county and suing 3 county commissioners, which is certainly newsworthy. I mean, it's unique in my experience.
Hoping to be successful at least once.
And both sides, maybe if they hired him, you think he'd probably drop the lawsuit because his damages.
I'm not so sure he would. But go ahead.
All right.
What else did Mr. Baer say?
Well, he said, now that Robertson has been cleared of all charges, and we'll talk about the ethics.
As was John Edwards.
As was John Edwards. Well, he had a hung jury. Let me give you a digression
here. Well, no,
here.
he's cleared of all charges because the government never prosecuted him again.
That's right.
He was cleared.
In a sense, he was cleared.
And O.J. was cleared.
And O.J. was definitely cleared. He was found not guilty.
Roger Clemens today is cleared.
Well, you can't talk about it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, because he's cleared.
I regret
We're not supposed to talk about it.
I shouldn't have mentioned that.
Okay.
He was cleared. Go ahead.
Let me give you an example of people being cleared and ethics. This happens at the federal level. Dennis Hastert was this, please endure this discretion, keep these thoughts in mind. Dennis Hastert was the Speaker of the House at one point.
Correct.
And he and a bunch of his friends bought a large bunch of property out in the middle of Illinois, Indiana somewhere, I forget exactly where, but it was a bunch of farm acreage, which they bought up at a reasonable price. The next thing you know, the federal government has built something called the Prairie Parkway at the instigation of Mr. Hastert, which greatly increased, of course, the value of the property. If you've got a big parkway going through your property, it makes it way more valuable. So they flipped it and made a ton of money, whereupon ethics charges were brought. The Ethics Committee came out with this remarkable...
The Congressional
Ethics Committee. This isn't the one that cleared and exonerated and absolved Mr. Robertson.
Right.
But they said, well, as long as one other citizen benefits, then there's nothing wrong with it.
No ethics problem.
No ethics problem. Now, should we take the position that it would be wrong? Why are you bringing this up? This is wrong to persecute this good, honest public servant over this. Well, okay. Well, that's the position he takes. Isn't it interesting? The newspaper would bring this erroneous charge.
Yeah,
he didn't promote Mr. Gibbs.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't responsible for getting him. That wasn't the choice.
That wasn't the best word to pick.
That wasn't the best choice.
Wasn't the best word.
Well, here's another paragraph.
Okay, yeah.
Now that he has been cleared of all charges, one would think the PAJ would stop persecuting an innocent public servant who's running for office. Yeah. And good morning. The trial is ended 4 months ago. Commissioner Robertson was found not guilty. He is not found not guilty of doing a bad job for his constituents. He has not been found not guilty of giving away county money. It's just a whole different standard. It's nonsense. Yes. And to suggest that now with an election coming up, we should not be allowed to talk about it.
Politicians do not like to have their missteps in the paper.
Here's what makes it worse, to my mind, and puts it on a par with what's going on in this other story we're going to talk about. To this day, now, when the 3 county commissioners, they wanted had to have their lawyers at public expense because this happened during a county commission meeting and further into the business. Yeah. He voted against it.
We covered that. Yep, he did. Well, the truth is, probably none of them should have voted on it because they all had an interest one way or the other. The only one didn't was the Valentine, and he was gone out fishing over in the district.
And then he came back and said, well, when I had my ethics problems, you didn't give me a lawyer, so I'm voting against you. Which is, really classy conduct for the 3rd grade, not for the county commission.
This is an interesting view of life. To suggest someone, as you pointed, is not guilty of indiscretion, poor judgment, insider dealing, buddyism or what, because he was found not guilty of the way they framed an ethics charge. It's like, no, wait, let's not go overboard. Okay, yes, he was cleared of the ethics charge. He was cleared of the ethics charge. But let's not
because they couldn't find an ordinance that he violated.
Yeah, well, let's not go berserk and say that this is the vindication and the restoration of the white knight status is not exactly right. But again, the suggestion by anybody. And listen, this letter is written by a friend. It's okay. I mean, the editorial piece. It's not wrong for a friend to write an editorial supporting a friend, even if he's a politician. But it's just kind of misunderstands things. And Bill, really, I think it suggests, too, that sometimes businessmen don't quite get the ethics that we should employ in public office.
Right.
It might have been okay at the business meeting or on a business deal or whatever, when you didn't quite cross the line, so you were vindicated of any wrongdoing. These are public officials. We hold them to a much higher standard than the business community. And I think really what a businessman's done here is judge this elected public official by businessman standards, which are not bad standards. They're just kind of on the edge.
This gentleman is running for office. This is when his record is supposed to be scrutinized. He didn't take himself out of the game.
He did not.
He put himself in the game. Now, here's my parallel, which I love.
Okay, good.
John Edwards he wasn't found not guilty, but there was a hung jury. They're not going to prosecute him. Right. So wouldn't it be legitimate to say, well, John Edwards was just trying to do a good citizen's job and help an unwed mother.
That's all he was doing.
That's all he was trying to do. And now that he's been cleared of all charges, it's wrong to say he did the slightest thing wrong.
The
This
audacity.
business about
Yeah.
cheating on his wife and all of that, we shouldn't talk about that. That's audacious right now to even talk about
Shut
Senator Edwards.
Down the newspapers on that subject.
That's it.
And of course,
The status
he was
quo.
a trial lawyer, and our view is that you should not ever say anything disparaging about a trial lawyer, no matter what they did. And
Oh,
in
we're
this
being
case,
persecuted all over the
we're
place
being
anyway.
persecuted, and so in this case, John
So
Edwards,
that's enough of that.
trying to help an unwed
Just
mother.
trying to help an unwed mother. It was all a misunderstanding.
Everyone loves a love child. I don't think. How could you have a love child that you didn't love? I mean, that's the issue here. That's the real issue. And why should the press continue this harassment
To berate
of
this
a
fine
person
public
who has
citizen.
been vindicated of all charges, and he's a trial lawyer, and he's serving the people of this
And the
country?
same thing happened to O.J. They wouldn't let up on O.J.
They wouldn't
you know?
stop. They wouldn't
The
stop.
jury found him not
And they
guilty.
finally had to fabricate him breaking in and beating people up and stealing back some of his trophies. Anyway, they finally got him.